Welcome everybody to today's construction tech episode at Passive House Accelerator. I'm Shannon Pendleton and I lead Passive House projects at Sanderson Sustainable Design. And I'm super excited to invite you all here today. And in light of recent events,
More excellent information.
In light of recent events, I have to take a minute to express how grateful we are here at Passive House Accelerator for the community of brilliant minds, able hands, and fearless hearts. We only exist because you made it happen, you dared to do it differently, and you've shared each triumph and trip along the way on this live little screen that makes its way around the globe. So code is changing, change is real because of the chances you take, the imagination you bring, and the courage you prove in your designs. So we're going to keep it going today, friends. Keep doing it, make it bold, and make us proud. We get you. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sean and Kevin to tell you a little bit more about what we're up to. Sean, over to you.
I'll take it over.
On a job site. All right, Kevin, maybe we lost her. Maybe you had to get back to work.
It's all right. The field office is open here for me at Brennan Insulation and Air Tightness. I'm Kevin Brennan. I'm a contractor here in New York City. I've had the great privilege on working on some of the early multifamily projects here in New York City that spurred the movement of Passive House. And it's great to have our cousins from up north in the Boston area that are those early adapters implementing these Passive House projects that show the future of construction, what is possible, and tells the people who say, no, you can't do that, that costs money and it's impossible, that it can be done and it's deliverable. So this presentation is about the multifamily Passive House projects, and presenting that this is the team from NEI. I'll introduce Jessica Morrissey. She's a lead AP, a certified Passive House builder, and she's the Associate Director of Pre-Construction. With a background in pre-construction, Jessica, and estimating, Jessica brings 19 years of experience in affordable housing and multifamily. In her role as the Associate Director of Pre-Construction Services, she ensures coordination between the design and construction teams during the project development and the start of construction. Jessica will provide assistance with project assessment, documentation, coordination details, project scoping, and project strategies. Jessica is a certified Passive House builder and a lead accredited professional. In 2018, Jessica was named Women in Construction by the editorial board at Construction Tech magazine for technology within a construction company. Thank you, Jess. Chris Burke, General Superintendent, is a certified Passive House builder. Chris's interest in construction sparked when he was a freshman in high school and helped to offer a local carpenter help working on his family's home. With 26 years of experience, Chris has tremendous experience building projects ranging from luxury high-density multifamily developments, urban and open. Chris's primary focus is in the analysis of the structural, civil, MEP scopes of work to ensure the project is constructible and coordination of the project. He assists with the development of the site logistics, operation strategies, sequencing to ensure that a swift, efficient completion of the project is done. Chris, Jess, thank you for joining the show. Welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
So, welcome everyone. We really appreciate you coming here, as they already did a great job introducing us, so we won't spend a ton of time on this slide. A little bit about NEI. Chris and I are based here in Randolph, Massachusetts, which is home base and for Boston operations. We also have offices in Florida and Texas. A little bit more about us. These are some of the Passive House projects that are either completed, almost completed, or in construction now. We have about 10 Passive House projects in the pipeline. So these are just, the 4 on the screen are representative, small sampling of them. And throughout our office, we have 19 certified Passive House builders throughout all, varying positions from, pre-construction through field and project management staff. So today we wanted to talk about, myths of Passive House construction, depending on how familiar you are with it. it can seem like a potentially daunting task to achieve. So I think some of it is, so some of the things we're gonna talk about is, you know, subcontractors, materials, availability and cost, and construction duration, and what implications do those really have on your projects when you decide to implement passive house construction. You'll probably notice this picture in our preview picture, the first slide. You might all recognize that building, which is in Cambridge. It's the Finch, which Chris was lucky enough to work on. And I think one of the first Massachusetts passive certified projects. So I'll give Chris a little runway here to talk about some of these myths and.
All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for having us. So sticking with the Finch, right? That was one of the first multifamilies in Massachusetts, and with that comes starting, you know, the process ground up with everybody. Subcontractors obviously hadn't seen passive house, maybe heard of it in passing. They're used to dealing with lead, things like that. So, you know, getting everybody on the same page and understanding, you know, the importance of them being the trades being the masters of their trades and us facilitating their work and getting everybody organized. It took a lot of collaboration, pre-planning, things like that, and looking through different materials that work. So, you know, we started this process early. We partnered up with the design team, we partnered up with our subs, and, you know, we held different meetings at different times to talk through that current milestone and, you know, ultimately looking at different products. So, you know, originally we started with a certain AVB, then we switched to another one. Then through that, we learned that they had different tapes and things like that, different wraps that allowed us more flexibility. For those of you that don't know, Finch Cambridge is a 6-story building, two levels of podium, 4 levels of wood on top of it, and originally didn't start off as a passive house project. And it was, you know, it was pre-approved during the process. So working through all that was huge. So again, subcontractors getting their buy-in, making sure that the details were feasible for them, looking at different products, talking to manufacturers, having them come out, work through it with us, and then, you know, doing live mock-ups and, you know, at different stages of the project, because obviously we need to hit stride schedule-wise, but we also need to make sure we're able to achieve the details. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. The details meet passive house, then we can get the trades to where they need to be.
So talking a little bit more about the process, you know, I guess you have the kind of the bookends here of pre-construction through construction with me and Chris.
Right.
Pre-construction, we really spend time with the owners and the design team to define the project design. How do we get the design that our owner and architect are looking for, the passive house requirements, and meet a budget. So when we're lucky enough to work on a project from conceptual stages through construction, it's really, you know, quite a great process, because we can really review, price, get some feedback, and repeat as needed. But then we can kind of identify challenges early in the process. I think we all know sometimes everything works on paper, and then Chris gets in the field and it doesn't, and that's what makes him and his team so good at what they do. But what we try to, you know, do ahead for him is, you know, where have we, you know, learned, taking lessons that we learned from other projects, or researching other products if something is not going to work either in the passive house model or the budgetary model. I mean, I think that that's something that we all know comes into play. So we want to make sure that a package as a whole kind of gets to where we need to be. And it's a lot of collaboration. We like to be involved, not just at like the designated milestones of schematic design, development, and construction, but all the little bits in between, because I think we all know that there are a lot of different pieces and parts to construction, and the domino effect of changing one thing here affects something else there. And so you're really, again, back to that collaboration of, you know, oh, here's a product that might work, and now we're going to go to the energy consultants and make sure that there's not a ripple effect. And if it works, that's great. We can all pat ourselves on the back and move on to the next piece of the puzzle. But it's really, you know, collaborative, and process between all of us. And then we like to tee it up as best we can to hand over to Chris and his team, so that when they get boots on the ground and start going vertical, or actually Passive House starts at the foundation.
That's it.
I shouldn't jump ahead to going vertical, but that the things are planned out as best as possible. I mean, there's gonna be hiccups, and that's how we learn more, is occasionally is when there's more, data to go from. So the more we do, the better we can refine the process also. So some of the things we do to make it work through the process is.
Yeah, so going back to what Jess was just saying, a big part of it is taking it in chunk, right? You have your milestones you want to hit. We know what we need to do to get there. You could easily get lost in the sauce with, having a global conversation about the entire project. But if you're coming out of the ground, you're dealing with the foundation, getting ready for steel, getting ready for wood, you don't necessarily need to be talking about, drywall and compartmentalization at that point in time. We need to be working through the foundation and then get to, pre-rock and insulation and things like that. So, we would get with our trades and say, okay, this aspect of the job is going to require, we need the framer here, we need the sider here, we need the, whoever owns the exterior envelope, I should say. Cider, like a Finch Cambridge, it was the cider did the windows, the AVB, and the siding, right? So we would have them come in, look at different intersections. Same time we're dealing with steel on the first floor and the concrete, making sure that we had the AVB tied in at that level. Once we got through that part, we start to meet with the MEP trades and somebody like the HVAC contractor. We'd look at what we needed to do, the milestones we needed to hit, and how do we test that ductwork in sections so that we could move on to the next phase of the building and get ready to go. So we have our pre-test, we'd have our inspections and realize that, hey, we got to put up the main trunk first, cap that, test it, and then we could roll into tying it into the units and then go back and start working on insulation and get to that point. And, literally just set milestones with the trades. We work through the details with them. They tell us where they could meet it, where they couldn't. Then from there, we go back to the drawing board, and these meetings were all basically separate meetings from your typical construction meeting, typical owner's meeting. So it worked out well. Again, can't stress enough being proactive, and subs are the masters of the trades. They do it every day. We go through a life cycle of a project. We'll see certain trades at certain times, and then we'll see them again on the next project where they're finishing, whether it's the ductwork, whether it's the concrete, they're doing that every day for the life of their career.
Yeah, and I think your point earlier about, coordination and building to the details is such a huge important one, especially if you're in a region of the country or somewhere that isn't as familiar with Passive House. There might be this, I'm nervous to do this.
Right.
I don't know, what are the implications? I think,
And that
when we
actually
first started, subs think I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
my shirt on this. But it's really just, I think, like you said, they're masters of their trades.
Right.
You break it down, it's just you're building to the details. It's, yes, the details may have some extra steps.
Yeah.
But.
And that conversation actually happened with a specific trade was the drywaller, and talking through it early on before the project started. And the immediate response from one of them was, "Hey, I don't know Passive House." I was like, "Okay, well, let's take a step back. You see any issues with the details?" "No, I should be able to do this, maybe a couple things that work, that don't work." It's like, all right, well, if all the details work and you can build those, you're building Passive House. And then it was like, you could see the sense of calm come over, and it's like, all right, I just got to follow it. And then we started doing mock-ups. We had a mock-up outside to get us as far as we could with windows, siding, AVB, and then we were doing in-unit mock-ups as well. And again, sectioned it out, taking it in chunk, hit milestones, like we're gonna look at this, we're gonna go, we document it, and then we see where issues were and how we had to get things moving, and then we could apply it to the next 100 unit or next 97 units, I should say. It was a 98 unit project.
Right, you have your baseline that you've set,
That's it.
your reference point, so that everyone can go back and refresh
Yes.
if they need to.
And lots of paperwork to follow so that we could issue, like, here's what we did in this unit, apply this. All these units look similar layout. These ones may be a little different. So let's look and make sure you don't have a problem there. Maybe we go into one unit and then one different unit and see if there's any problems there, and then we can tee that up for the following meeting or something.
So yes, there's some extra meetings, but I don't think that there's a huge correlation between an extensive, additional duration on your construction schedule associated with those. I mean, I think it's just proper planning that, probably any project could benefit from, whether it's passive house or not, so.
It's never too early to start looking at it and working through it, right?
Yeah, so some more lesson learned here, and this graphic that we have up is also from the Finch,
Yeah.
right? I believe, so this was, I think, probably a little bit was because it wasn't intended to be passive house from the start, but it also gave some real great, learning and understanding of how to have these intersecting assemblies. I'll let Chris explain it a little bit more, but so we wanted to put this up to kind of show how we, I guess, broke this little portion of the building down into some manageable bites for everyone and set this like order of construction, very specifically.
So again, Finch, it started off as non-passive house and then was approved during the process. And as you're looking at that graphic, to the right is the first floor, would be the first floor leasing office area, amenity space. That was outside of the passive house. To the left was inside the passive house, and clearly you have steel on the exterior of the building. So this was an area, I won't call it a challenge, but it was an opportunity for us to work through the details and make sure it covered, and it led to the rest. So it was a podium that you could park underneath, so it was wide open on the ground floor level, and then the passive house started on the next floor up to the left outside of that image. So it just gave us this is a good example of something that we had to work through and make sure that we achieved what needed to happen there, and clearly we were successful.
This one is just an example of, we had some success on a blower door test. But I think there are some sequencing of this testing that Chris already touched on a little bit that is important to note, that there is some midpoint blower door test results that should be done to ensure that when you get to the end of the road, that you're also going to have success for your.
Yeah. A challenge with this, similar to LEED, is the testing, the final testing is done at the end of the project. So we needed to come up with ways where we could turn around and get that comfort level. Whether we're doing compartmentalization of the actual unit, doing the duct testing, and getting as far along as we could so that, we hit the milestones that needed to happen. One for passive house certification, but also that we knew we weren't going to be opening things up. And, we changed our sequence a little bit. We introduced some third-party help to, come in and join us for a day and test things out. And, I can't say enough how important that part was. We were able to keep moving forward and, wrap the building up and hit stride when we needed to.
Yeah, Holbrook is actually another project where you had some field troubles. It's not always the case that we get to work out everything in pre-construction. Sometimes we get into the project further along in the design and it's pretty set in stone.
Yep.
And I think to get some of the compartmentalization between the units.
Yeah, there's some tricky details at Holbrook, but same thing. Work with the architect, work with New Ecology, and we did some pre-testing and things like that, and made a couple of small changes to make it work, and it was just looking at stuff, being proactive, and then applying it to where that issue happened.
Yeah. So I do have a slide for this, but I'm not going to click to it yet because I know I'm sure everyone is wanting to know. How much does this cost? What is the impact to my project? And so I guess I'll say there are many factors that go into that. There's client project priorities, building design, materials. We do a lot of affordable housing, so that there's some regulations, for the lenders and such that are required to implement that could affect how the building is designed. So just the site specific, what is your project site? And the building that you can put on it and the size of the building, can all affect the passive house bottom line, because some of those things might have implications on how you have to implement or how you have to create the details. And those details may cost more than a different way to do it, which is, I guess somewhat of the beauty of passive house, I think, though, is that it is a little bit more prescriptive and you can find different ways to achieve the same goal. And sometimes it works and sometimes you have a site or a project constraint that just doesn't, help you in that fashion. But I think that's, one of the things I know in pre-construction that I find a fun challenge is getting projects to work out for everyone, budgetary and get them over the line to construction. So punchline is we've calculated here, I guess in the Northeast, mostly Boston and surrounding areas, about 2% of a cost increase directly relating to passive house. Then some of those other items that I just mentioned could be 5 to 10% additional. So those all kind of go into the whole package, right? You look at different projects in different places, and sometimes it's just there's so many different variables. How do you really truly pull out the exact cost? So some other things to consider too when you're thinking about cost implication is where the passive house envelope is. I guess kind of that picture we had up where there was an intersection of the two required a little bit more detailing. How your exterior wall assembly is constructed. So again, that's something we may go through a couple different iterations in pre-construction of exterior wall assemblies to find the best one that meets the requirements of the project. Foundation insulation and detailing, depending on what type and how deep your foundations are. Windows are always a good one, although I will say that there's been, I guess, a few more manufacturers out there. I think 2 of them now have stateside production facilities, which is helping a little bit. But I think there's a little bit more competitiveness we've seen in the market on those recently. And then similar to the passive house envelope, but how much exterior storefront or passive house doors do you have within the intersection of the envelope? So those are all pieces, I guess, of the recipe that goes into construction of a building and getting it certified as passive house. So with that, I guess we can open it up to questions. That is our last slide.
Well, thank you guys very much. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate your insight, and keep blazing the trail up there in Boston. And
Sure.
if I find myself in the area, I know who to call to get a few construction site tours and see how you guys are doing.
There you go, for sure.
Anytime. We have quite a few going on.
Yeah.
Awesome. And it's great to see how detail focused you guys are. And that's why we created Tech Tuesdays, and we run the show, because at the end it comes down to the technical details of building a passive house that makes the difference, and learning takes the fear away. And I really applaud you guys for investing in training and getting your people trained. So you can definitely tell within your work. So
Thank you.
Yeah, that number will be climbing too. We frequently put groups through, and we're definitely a believer. So.
And I can tell that you guys are masters in your craft, because you talk a lot about mock-ups, and I'm going to steal Shannon's question here. But what's your mock-up? You guys actually doing on-site blow-a-door testing of mock-ups, or just kind of like field view, kind of like sequencing mock-ups, or first run mock-ups? What's your mock-up on-site wise, besides the required mock-ups that happen?
Well, it depends, right? Depends on the project, depends on what we're doing, but I can tell you, the teams that I work with, we are big on making sure that we have everything outlined to the best of our ability ahead of time, so that we can issue something and work through the problems, right? So if we just stick with Finch Cambridge, we did an exterior mock-up of the building for not only the window install, then we worked through the AVB, all exterior MEP penetrations, how we were going to do that. Then we turned around, we did the siding. And then when it came to do actual testing of it, we went to a live mock-up at the unit, installed the first window, all tape and spray foam, no caulking, and we had no issue with it. So it worked out well. And then as we were building the units, we were doing compartmentalization, like pre-rock is huge, right? Pre-insulation is huge, so you can get to where you need to. So you have your intersecting corners up above. We would create a drawing for that, so we knew where to look for it. go out and mark it up in the field so that we could see what it looked like in the units and where we needed to make sure that the trade saw it, whether it was just a, color of paint on a stud or something to that effect. And then we would pick an actual mock-up unit to do certain aspects of it. Typically your first floor is going to be different than your mid floors. And then your top floor is going to be a little bit different than that. Depending on how the roof is framed and things like that, whether trusses are running parallel, they're intersecting, the structural components of it, the intersection. So we would pick different spots of that building and do the mock-ups there. So, and in terms of like blower door, I think I saw somebody's question. We do have our own blower door system that we'll bring to jobs. Many people in the company have gone through the training on how to use it. We also have our own window testing equipment, and we've partnered with some of the third-party consultants, and we'll bring them in for a day and have them work through it with us so that we can see where we're running into potential issues or areas to improve on, and we'll do that on our end.
That's phenomenal and great work, and you're officially the first contractor I know that owns window testing equipment. So applaud to you.
Windows being waterproof is super important to us. So we spend a lot of time on that and take a lot of pride in making sure we hit those details.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and we'll continue on with the rest of the questions. Shannon, you have any?
Sure.
Absolutely, Kevin. And yes, Chris, Jess, incredible presentation, learning a lot as we go. And we have a couple questions in the chat, but I'm going to throw a follow-up question in on Kevin, since we've been talking so much about mock-ups. Your slide where you showed a photograph of the site and then you put graphics on top of it to really explain how the sequencing occurred. Do you find that when you're on site that you use a mix of 3D mock-ups that are digital versus real mock-ups with real materials? And if so, can you talk about maybe different instances where you find them to be a best practice?
I'd say, like, from a field standpoint, I would much rather walk into that unit or that room and, all right, here's a real intersection. Here's what it looks like on the drawings. Let's go look at this and see how it applies in the field. Do we need to cheat, trusses off the wall a little bit more so the drywall is continuous, rather than look at it on paper or anything like that? Don't get me wrong, we do that. We get as far as we can with that, but at the end of the day, going in and actually looking at it on site with the team, saying we got 98% of it covered. These are our two problem areas, then we can hone in on that and get a result.
Right, take what you put on the paper, right? The architect plans,
Yep.
the sequence, take it into a unit and say, can this actually be done?
And then grabbing the subcontractor and saying, all right, this looks like it works for everybody. What do you think? And then from there, they either say, yeah, that's not a problem, or here's the potential issue and here's why. And then from there we work through it.
And do you find that those mock-ups start to create discussions about cost and performance and substitutions that you might suggest back up the design chain?
It absolutely can. But I think that's also depending on what you're talking about, right? So
yeah, of course.
I mean, you see different.
Yeah, it may come back to me from a look out for this on the next project. I don't know that you guys shift product.
We have. I mean, it's
too much once you're actually in the field, but I mean, I guess probably if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pre-planning ahead with the design team, right? So they've gone through a whole bunch of stuff. So changing things is not always as easy. It's more like, hey, let's get with the manufacturer rep or whatever and see if we can't make this work. So one thing that we found to be helpful, for example, rather than going up to, everybody understands what I mean by fire tops and pre-rock, right? Rather than going up there and taping it and caulking it, you can spray it. Hilti makes a product that you can actually put through a paint sprayer, and it's going to give you a better product, in my opinion, than going up there with a caulk gun and trying to caulk the top of that UL assembly. So things like that we work through, you know what I mean? And making sure that we had the engineering judgment from Hilti so that we could apply that where needed and make sure we hit the the required UL assembly.
Great answer. Thank you so much for
Sure.
that. Our first question up is from Corey. Corey, are you with us? And would you like to unmute, ask your question? And Corey, if you're not able to unmute, I can ask it for you.
Please go ahead. I'm in a noisy area.
Got it. You're in a noisy area. Thank you very much. So, Corey asks, especially with so many trades and subs and novices to PH building, how do you keep cost down in order to build affordable, yet trades can be productive while they learn?
I mean, we're building to the details, right? So they've already looked at the details and all that before the project. And then it's up to us to help facilitate the schedule.
Yeah.
So, you know, on our end or my end in the field, I'm turning around and seeing what's the best sequence to hit the dates. Do we want to phase the project? Do we want to turn around and, you know, build half of it and get it dry so that we can work through, you know, the MEPs, and rather than bring the whole frame up and then put the windows in, then put the roof on, or vice versa. Maybe we can take it in chunk and get started and start going vertical with some of the MEPs and just get ahead of that so that we're not, you know, prolonging the schedule. We're actually trying to shorten it up.
I think too, you know, obviously we have our roster of subcontractors.
Yes.
And some, as they gain more experience, you know, become more proficient in, I think, understanding that. So not to say that we don't, you know, we spread the subcontractor wealth across the board to who builds the projects with us. But there is some knowledge that's earned with our subcontractors as we go through the projects as well, that just makes their experience that much easier, and I think helps their pricing a little bit too.
And just like anything, right? You do, the first time you do it, you're a little slower and you're trying to figure it out. And then once you have an understanding of it, then you're looking at it yourself and you can start to forecast where the issues are, you know?
Excellent point. Thank you. And Corey, I hope that answered your question. Our next question up is from Bev Craig, who knows just a little bit about multifamily.
Well, you already answered my question about having in-house blower door capabilities, which I think is so great. It's wonderful to see general contractors who have that ability. I think it helps a lot of times more than people expect. But I guess my second follow-up question was, you are dealing with a lot of projects, some with really experienced architects and teams directing, and some that have never done this before. Do you have any major advice for how you deal differently with those two kinds of categories?
Like the experienced architect in passive house versus not.
Right. So like Finch, right? Michelle
Right.
Pigion's the woman, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think
great.
Holbrook, they've never done one before, right?
Right. We had new ecology there, which was great. They obviously were part of both, but you know, it's looking at the details and talking through it early.
Yeah.
And picking those mock-up units. I think at Holbrook, we did 3 separate mock-up units for different things. And we scheduled time to come out. We had new ecology come out. I can't stress enough that pre-planning and looking at stuff early is it's super important. And then, you know, at a certain point, it becomes cookie cutter, right? You start, all right, it gets, you know, Holbrook was 70 plus units. Here's what we did in this unit, we tested, it works. So let's apply it to the next and keep working through it. And then, you know, taking it in chunk.
Yeah.
Literally, we want to get to drywall. We want to get to this. We want to install a fan coil. Here's what we got, rather than overloading with, you know, 50 items to look at. Let's look at 5.
Right. And I guess like a new ecology or clear result is a resource for us and for the architects. Just making sure that we're a resource for the architectural team if they aren't as experienced in it, to kind of help them through the process and make sure that they're, you know, understanding maybe some reasons why we're saying we can't do it this way, or we need to redo this a little bit into a different, you know, untraditional sequence or something like that.
Right. And on the team, I mean, Holbrook, a whole bunch of people on that team went through CPHP. So they all had it. They knew it. They understood the concept and looking through it. It's like, hey, what do you think here? Have you seen it? So, you know, we're collaborating in-house and then making sure that, you know, if we need to present an option, we can. If not, then, hey, here's the question. So,
Yeah, I'll say, like, from the 8 projects that Massey's he's had money in, the lower incremental cost was always the more advanced teams. So the more education and experience people get, the cheaper this gets, because you don't have to redo anything. You sort of know what you're doing, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Bev. And speaking of getting everything into its proper bucket so we can all carry more water faster, we have a moment to thank some sponsors. So over to you, Zach.
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewiso, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Coltraco Ultrasonics, Euroline Windows, Holstrom System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
What a great reel. Good job, Zach. That's perfect. And thank you to all of our sponsors. Definitely. That's how we do what we do. That's how it all gets happening. So Kevin, I know you're here with us, and Sean came back for a minute. And I think we even had Mark here for a sec. Sean, did you want to jump in? And
Hey, sorry for the Wi-Fi issues to kick off the sound affected you guys, but glad to be here. Great presentation by the team at NEI Boston. Thank you very much. Love the insights. And I mean, I love when we get into the costs. I mean, we all recall our Harvey question of the morning, and it was answered so clearly and eloquently. And now we just got to start building more passive houses. So great examples of the lessons learned. And Shannon, let's just keep the questions rolling.
perfect. Well, next up is Tim Breen, and he asked me to ask
One
for
moment.
him. And Tim's question was, has the NEI team had any experience using insulated architectural precast cladding for your exterior systems? Great question, Tim. I don't know, I think you're muted, Jess and Chris. Did you catch the question from Tim?
Sorry, there was a poll up on the screen.
Got it.
So I had to take a second to unmute. So yeah, so the question was on architectural precast concrete
Yeah,
products.
architectural precast cladding for exterior systems that's insulated. Have you used any of those?
So like a wall guard product. But
Yeah, there's
not-
a lot of them out there. There's a Kingspan, there's Wall Guard,
Yep.
there's
Yeah.
more mom and pop. There's the, what's the really cool one that's vacuum insulated, and there's a bunch, right?
So I've done Kingspan and Wall Guard on multiple projects. Holbrook has Wall Guard on, around the base.
Have you used their phenolic resin?
I don't believe I have. Trying to think. Last resin product I used, I think was called like Parklex, but that was 10 years ago.
Very good, thank
So,
you.
a lot of Nichiha, Z-Gertz, Cascadia Eclipse, things like that.
Yeah.
Hardy.
Hardy.
Yeah.
Panels, plank,
Thank you. Next up is Denise Finley. Are you still with us, Denise? I'll take a look in the, yeah, it looks like you're here. Maybe you can't unmute or you can't hear me. I can ask your question as well. She says, for blower door testing, is this done per individual unit? What measures are put in place? Oh, and you know what? You did answer this already. But she talked about pressurized versus depressurized in order to isolate the test sample. Did you guys get to that part of her question?
I don't believe so.
I thought.
I mean, we were taking samples of the building just to, blower door of the actual units, and during the process, God, I want to going all the way back to Finch. I mean, where our whole building test was quite the undertaking. We were there multiple days, prepping and testing it off hours. So, but our pre-tests are pretty much, we're doing whatever we need to meet, the passive house checkpoint.
Thanks, Chris. And Noah, are you with us, Noah? Would you like to unmute?
Yeah, thank you guys again for the presentation. I'm just curious that obviously on the financing side, there's kind of a lot of special considerations and things that are typically building affordable housing.
I can't really hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you may need to repeat that one. Sorry.
I just dropped it back into the chat, Noah. So hopefully it's the same question you sent originally, which is, are there any special considerations that you make given the focus on affordable housing construction?
You mean affordable housing with passive house?
I think that's a safe assumption.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's the budget might be a little bit tighter because there's some other requirements of affordable housing that we have to implement as well. But I don't think that there is too much impact on one another.
I'd love to piggyback on Noah's question and say, what about systems? You know, are there special considerations for systems that you see being more affordable, especially if you've got a builder who is working with a new system and installing a new system? Either decentralized,
So we've tried to do some studies in the
magic
different,
box.
right? You're talking about like central ERVs versus individual, central hot water versus individual water. And I guess the jury was still out on that one. I think it's can be so individualized for each project. We are seeing a little bit more, I guess, in the Boston area, the adoption of the all electric services throughout, and that can have some cost impacts on the mechanical and plumbing ends of things. But
I think also, recent supply chain issues are weighing in on that too, right?
Yeah.
So true.
I really know how well
The
it's
biggest
gonna
bullet
work.
point on how much does it cost is how to separate the supply chain and the volatility in some of in the markets lately. I mean, that has been its own animal outside of anything that we can control.
Yep, it's a true story. I think you're not alone in that one. And
Right. Yep. But I think back to the mechanical systems too, there's some at play there too, is how the owner wants to operate, right? Installation cost versus maintenance and operational cost. And that's something that they have to decide on their own end as well. That's kind of outside of our, we don't weigh in on that. That's their decision to make. And that might drive the design as well. So.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I've been thinking about. When you work in early design with the team, do you have discussions about that modeled versus measured and operational maintenance, how those three might come together?
We'll talk about the different systems with the team. Usually the mechanical engineer is involved and kind of we're all, there's a narrative and we're kind of all talking it through and seeing what is potentially the best solution. And I guess we bring it up, but I guess we're also not, we don't run the buildings after. So some of that data they need to, we can tell them first install cost and some feedback that we receive from the subcontractors on, maintenance or operational costs, and they can use that to assist their decision. So we certainly talk about it, but I think it's something that we let them drive the bus on how they ultimately want to proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear where that driver begins and how you might bring it up to institute it. Next up, Bev Craig again. Welcome back, Bev.
So what would be the hardest challenge for details that you found? Is it in the podium construction? Are there any trends in what you see as not very hard and what is hard for you to actually get done with Passive House?
Great question.
Thermal bridging is definitely one that, is always on my radar anyway. You take something as simple as hanging a sign from the outside of a building. You got to chase that all the way back to how it connects inside, right? And you're looking at podium, you're trying to break that up, and just those intersections down to the foundation and making sure that that's all starting, day one on a project, right? So then when it comes to compartmentalization, I think some of the challenges that are faced is the type of construction. So if you're doing a wood frame building, if everything is, all the structural walls are wood, and then you, like H metal, I think you have a better opportunity to compartmentalize that rather than your traditional wood frame corners where you need to step back. Like if you're doing a panelized building, all right, well, now you need to account for the air gap here. But when you're building the panel, and then, structural engineer, we need to weigh in and make sure that, the shear walls are connected properly. Are we going to dump SDS screws 12 inches on center, or does that not matter in this application? Things like that. So I think those are ongoing challenges that present themselves, different scenarios, different jobs constantly. You can always chase that until you get the building in drywall.
Bev, does that answer your question? Great. Is the NEI team looking at all toward doing prefab and including that kind of load path analysis in a prefab panel? Or is that just a bridge too far when you're doing affordable right now?
I think we would entertain it if it came across, but we have not seen any projects that are prefab going that route.
Yet, right?
Yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
Great. All right, our next question is from Tanya. Tanya, would you like to unmute?
Hey everyone. Yeah, let me just scroll back and see where I put it. Okay, I'm curious to know what the best strategy is to actually find the people who are wanting to put up these kinds of high quality passive house or high performance multifamily projects. Like, what is the best way to go about introing and finding people, and especially in the affordable housing sector? Like, what's the path in?
Are you like general or ownership side? Or either.
So we're actually a prefab company.
Well, I would, I guess, start with coming to events like this.
Check.
Because you obviously have a lot of like-minded people on this Zoom call. So if you want to reach out to either one of us, if you want to reach out to me, we can chat further about, your prefab capabilities and how they can intersect with projects. I mean, certainly there's always new routes and methods. One of the sponsors, Glavel, we've actually used on a project, and I think is a super cool product, and is probably an example of one that wasn't completely understood on the subcontractor side. Sort of pre-construction on that project, a site contractor looked at me and was like, I don't install that. And I was like, well, who will? It's going to be you. We're just going to have to learn, a little bit more about the product. So feel free to reach out to me.
I actually already sent you a LinkedIn request. So thank you so much for offering. And yeah, I would love to connect after the call.
Yeah. Are you in the Boston area or?
We are not. So our company is based out of British Columbia,
okay.
But we've put up projects in 7 different US states. And so mostly on the West Coast, Colorado, New Mexico, California, Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, Washington.
Yeah. And then so maybe also to reaching out to architects that are experienced in passive house, which I'm sure is difficult to get in the door and get 5 minutes of their time to talk about it, but
there's many strategies, and I'm just trying to tap as many as I can. But I thought like coming to this and potentially getting connected with you all would be wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tanya, and welcome to this community. You are going to be a very popular person, and we love where you're located. We love the climate you're working in, and please drop your information in the main chat so folks can reach out to you, because I'm sure that they will, and I might be one of them. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate that, and I will do that.
Great.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks. All right. Our next question up, I'm going to butcher your name, so apologies in advance. Sarik? Cap? Sarek? Cap? please correct me. Please come on and unmute yourself if you're still here. And it looks like you are, maybe you are unable to unmute in a workplace or a busy place. So Sarek or Sarik says, have any experience with PTAC units and windows being single hung and still passing the air tightness? So that's a package terminal heat pump.
Yes, I don't. Most of the windows we see are the triple pane tilt turn.
Mhm.
And I don't know of a project I've worked on in Passive House that's PTAC. Unless
No.
Chris, you have experience with that. It's not something I've seen.
I haven't seen PTAC unit. I think that could be, I mean, sealing the sleeve and all that shouldn't be a problem, but depending on how they need to test it, right? Because the back of it's gonna be wide open, but single hung windows, I think would be fine personally. I mean, the top doesn't operate, so as long as it meets the testing requirements, it shouldn't be an issue. I've actually done them in lead projects and they perform as expected, so.
Perfect. I was looking at a couple of units on Source 2050 because I do a lot of work with teams and use that site, and they've got some PTAC units on there. If you're curious, we can drop some links in the chat. But we've heard really huge success for retrofits on that front for increasing efficiency there. All right, next up, we have, I've lost my list. We have Mohammad Riza.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
welcome.
Yes, hello. I'm from Iran, and I'm really, I don't know, thankful for holding this webinar. At first, I'm really sorry about my lack of English knowledge. So I want to ask you, I'm a student and I'm working on passive houses in Iran for my thesis at American University. And we can't afford PHP design apps because they are real expensive for us in Iran with that financial problems that we have. So I'm wondering to find a new way to working on this kind of things with a new software that's for free or maybe cheaper. And I don't know anything about this kind of softwares. And our buildings are really traditional, and I want to run on the edge of technology. So I want to ask you if you know any software that I can work with that or something, a way that's gonna be affordable for me.
I don't know of any. I apologize.
I apologize.
I don't know if anyone on this call, maybe if you want to chime in, I don't know of any. I apologize.
Yeah, no, great question. I think maybe we could take it offline because we could connect with PHI and see what other efforts we could do to make the PHPP worthwhile for developing countries. So reach out to us and we'll connect with the right parties because pretty exciting. I think you're a first timer for that region. So thanks for joining us today. That's awesome.
Thank you for holding this webinar.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mohammad Riza. I know we can connect you, so please reach out to hello@Passive House Accelerator, and we can connect you with someone who I know has interviewed other people in Iran. So that might
It's gonna be my honor, actually.
Please do. Please send us an email. hello@passivehouseaccelerator.com. Thank you.
Please, if it's possible, send the email for me and I will send you an email with my, email address.
Great.
Mohammad Riza, you can direct message me here if you like with your email address and I'll make sure we're connected.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. I will send you a direct message.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Thanks so much. This was really a great presentation. And I just had a question about building integrated PV for facades, and if you've used any or actively exploring that stuff. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. I've heard it talked about. I haven't yet seen it detailed on a project yet. I think actually I'm trying to think, do we have one project in pre-con that might have solar sunshades? Trying to think of, I know you wouldn't know the pre-con, but I know.
I would say it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean,
We do know it exists, and I've definitely seen it here and there, but most of it has been rooftop. More, I guess, traditional PV versus kind of integrated into the facade.
Great question. Thank you so much. And we're going to head over to Derek. Hi, Derek.
Hello. Hey, I'm sorry, by the way, I missed the first half of the presentation, so I'll follow up on the video to get all the rest of the answers. But the question I had was, in low-income housing, mistakes from the subcontractors can get even more expensive. And you mentioned having some kind of startup demo units first, where you go through the training with the subs, et cetera. We've been running into a problem a couple of times lately where electrical subs think they know better. If you're unfamiliar with what I do, it's a DC lighting system. So it's wired with Cat5, much less copper, much less cost, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it's different. You can't just do it the way an electrician does it before. And so it happens quite often.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if that kind of replicates to all the different subs that you have, where they say like, well, we always do it this way. Does the training that you go through and saying like, we're going to do 2 units or 3 units, hand holding you through it, is that sufficient? Or do you actually have things in your contracts to help them stick to it and take some ownership of when they try to deviate and do things the old way?
I would say it's the answer is 3-part, right? So we have drawings and specs. That's going to call out how things are done. We do the mock-ups, but then also on the field side, we have our own checklist that we manage. So we'll turn around and we'll create, for instance, like an in-wall checklist. Before we go to drywall, our team's going in, they're checking out every single unit, making sure it's good. A lot of third-party reviews to come in and make sure, if we're doing 2 units together, the junction boxes aren't in the same bay. They have the gaskets needed, the wires are caulked inside the box if need be, things like that. Then if it's a shear wall and there's plywood on it, we're sealing around that, either from the back side or from the unit side. That's being reviewed and checked off, and it's part of our standard like in-house document. So we're helping to keep everybody in line, and at the end of the day, as a sub, you're associating like man hours to what you're doing, right? So once you can get yourself into that routine and you're progressing through the building, it's like, all right, half of it they know because we've done the mock-ups, and then we are keeping people honest by making sure that we're checking up, trust but verify, I like to say, but we're going in and we're working through punch lists and work to complete lists. And on our end, that's our way of making sure before we tell the architect or design team or the owner to come in and look at the building, we've already done it and here's what we've done so far. So, and we have a good relationship with just about everybody we work with. So, chances are, like, I can call an electrician right now. I met on my first job with NEI 12 years ago, and he's on a job that I'm doing right now. You know what I mean? So we get to know each other and we know how people work and things like that. So it's definitely a challenge, can be a challenge, but for the most part, I don't see that as a major challenge. It's just getting it organized early and then setting the precedent moving forward.
I think the contracts are probably pretty clear too, that, like you said, you own the plans and specs, meaning that's how you have to install it, no deviations, so.
And the software we utilize is all, it's a platform. We use Procore. So Procore is for, all you need is an email address and you're on our project. So it's, you can't say you didn't have the information. It's right there on your phone.
Yeah, what's the name of that tool again?
Procore.
Procore, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, may have heard of it.
So our subs, foreman has, as long as the team has an email address, we can link them in there as a foreman. They have access to all the submittals, they have access to all the drawings, all the R5s, all that stuff. And, in their contract, their company has agreed to utilize Procore with us. So just another check and balance.
On the same line, do you also try to narrow the choices? In other words, keeping the units as identical as possible so that you don't have as many.
Don't design.
Oh, as far as actual unit design?
We're a general contractor, so we're getting plans and specs, and then we're working through challenging details and going that way. We're not we're not building anything that wasn't designed by control construction, if you will.
Great stuff, Derek. Well, Chris and Jess, great presentation. And for everyone here, we've hit the top of the hour. We're actually into the final 15, as we call it. So if you do need to leave us because you got to get back to either lunch, work, or breakfast, or wherever you are on this lovely planet, we will say adieu to you. Enjoy the rest of your day. But if you still are having fun, stick with us for 10 more minutes as we will keep firing questions at Chris and Jessica because we're getting a handful of great information. So Shannon, we will say goodbye to our friends, but you keep giving the questions. But for the rest of you, stick around. See you next week. See you soon. Enjoy all the amazing things that the Accelerator puts out. And again, big thanks to the Accelerator team for all the work we do every week, every day. And let's keep firing questions at these two.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. I've got one from Zoe that she asked me to ask, who's also a co-host here on the Accelerator. She's surprised to hear that most of the windows that you're using are triple pane, and she wants to know, does that mean your projects are primarily PHI, or is it just the best strategy for your climate?
Yeah, probably.
I'd say best
strategy. Yeah,
Yeah,
to meet
part
the
of the
performance
design.
requirements.
Yeah, part of the design we're getting, we're getting the drawings and bidding to it. So
Excellent. That was what I was going to guess. So I'm glad to hear it. And I'm waiting for a couple more questions to come into the chat. I know folks are still curious, so please drop those in there. If I missed your question, please remind me, PM me, or pop it in there again. And apologies if that's the case. But I wanted to ask, you mentioned you do third-party testing and verifying, and I'm wondering, you mentioned you bring those lessons back to early design, the ones that you've learned in the field when you're doing testing and verifying. What are the best lessons learned there? I've heard from other folks, it's often, don't put the intake and outlet too high to reach when you come to test, or, things like that. What have you found your experience to show?
When it comes to getting ready to test the building, I think, we reviewing it in the field as we're getting ready for construction. Like the concrete's poured, we're starting wood frame. We'll have the conversation early on. All right, this is what we want to look at. This is what we want to test. Here's the, if it's the mechanical room, for example, it may be a small closet, it may be something you can walk in, double door. So we'll look at that and see to what point we need to get to. So I use the example of the ductwork at Finch. You can't really test flex duct, right? So we got as much of the trunk line up in the hall, stuffed into the units, capped it. Then we tested that for a day, realized that, wherever we had to make our corrections, we did. And then we broke it down and we put the flex duct on and we were good with that, right? So it's determining where to stop, where's your break point so you can go back and do it, realize that it's not as much of an issue or it is a big issue, and then adjusting from there. Each project's gonna be a little different, but I think another one that is easy to see based on experience is when you start looking at wall intersections and understanding compartmentalization and just making sure, right? If it's a panelized building, you're doing wood panels, you're gonna have, one floor is gonna have 1,000 page submittals. So you gotta be ahead of that stuff. You gotta look at it and realize what walls it's gonna impact, and then, because you don't wanna be moving walls. I don't know if anybody's been part of saw cutting nails on the floor and moving trusses over and things like that, but it is not one you want to have to do too many times. So we try to get ahead of different phases and look and just, you can tell where the problems are going to be, your four walls, if you will, that make up the home, I call it, right? It could be one building with 70 apartments with 70 homes in there. So looking at that structure and saying, okay, this could be an issue, and this may not be. Yeah. We should be good through here. We need to look at the corners. This unit has a little steel in it. Let's go to that,
Yeah, that might circle back to Ben's question about the experience of the architect or engineering team on your project as well. They may have already incorporated items that they've learned through their projects thus far, therefore when you get into construction, there might be less of them versus the architect that maybe didn't have as much.
Half of what we do is, experience and making sure we're not, reopening wounds, right? Not doing something that we didn't learn from. So just applying it and sharing it as a team. One, multiple people looking at the same thing is better than one.
I love it. Great teamwork answer. When it comes to that kind of advice, do you find that you also include advice for early ordering? Like which items do you like to order really early? Obviously, windows are always at the top of the list.
Yep.
But then when you're getting the specifications ready and you're doing alternates, right? So you've got your basis of design and then your alternate 1, alternate 2. And when the Suez Canal is blocked, alternate 3, 4, 5. How do you guys look at that from a pricing or supply chain or value engineering perspective when it comes time to price? And what advice would you give to teams doing the same thing?
As far as the procurement, so I think a lot of it comes back to relationships, right? About being flexible in procuring things with maybe minimal or no deposits to try and at least get your spot in line. Certainly look in the rearview mirror, the last few years have been more difficult than not as far as materials procurement and pricing being stable. So now it's really, working with the owners, getting them to provide us with like a limited notice to proceed to say, we're going to tell them you need to order the switchgear by X date so that it arrives within the proposed construction schedule. And so working with them to get that coordinated, and then in turn with our electrical, contractor partner. So there is definitely a lot of moving pieces to get all of those items, teed up in the process. But I think that's something that the project management kind of, the way we're set up here too, they tend to be a little bit more involved, during pre-con, especially during the tail end of it. So the handoff isn't as abrupt, and they're already starting to think about pre-purchasing of items or, when the drop dead date is.
And linking it to the schedule, I think is the big one that Jess touched on. We'll put the procurement log within the schedule, and we know when, hey, this has to go, so we need we need it ordered by this time, and it's a 6-week lead time, or
right.
If you're doing electrical now, maybe an 80-week lead time.
Right. And you said Windows, talking with the or any of them really. What is your current lead times? Windows were 18 weeks at one point, and they might be back down to 6 now, depending on your manufacturer. Are they coming from overseas or stateside? So again, working with your subcontractor partners and tying it to the schedule is really key to make sure that things run smoothly.
That is amazingly great advice. I am taking notes. Thank you. It looks like we are at 1/4 if we don't have any other questions in the chat. Kim, I see Mike Weiss's name is still there. Did he have another question, or did we satisfy that?
Yeah, I think one more question came in. I'm not sure if he's still on the call.
I am. Just a quick question about electric stoves in senior housing in Massachusetts. Like, do you see electric ranges going in there, or are they still putting in gas infrastructure?
Oh, electric ranges? I think, mostly they're electric.
Yeah, so we're
On the
Holbrook
cooking
Senior
appliance,
Housing,
yeah.
and that's all electric there.
Are you doing the induction cooktops?
No, just a pretty standard electric range. There may be gas to the building for mechanical systems. As I mentioned earlier, that's starting to move in a more electric direction, but for the cooking appliances, more likely in affordable housing is the electric cooktop.
Great. Well, I would love to keep everybody here for another half an hour to an hour and ask a lot more questions, but I know we've all got to get back to work. And Chris and Jess, we really appreciate the time you've taken with us today. Thank you so much for having us. Feel free to unmute and give a round of applause. Fantastic.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kim, if there are no final last words, I think we'll just ask everybody to have a fantastic day and share your work with the accelerator share your work with Source 2050 and any of the great sponsors that we have here.